I have to pay for the airtime for those transactions to process wirelessly, and there is a higher cost for doing that. There's more pennies involved to pay for the airtime, et cetera. And then the fleet owners, of course, in some situations. So those are the parties involved in the great 5% debate that you guys like to discuss. There are other options out there. There, as always in any solution, there's high-end, low-end. Best of all parties involved. You know, I want to thank personally Matt for what you guys did in New York City and bringing this credit card to the back of cabs. I know I enjoy it when I travel, to be able to pay with a credit card and have that tax write-off and the convenience of doing it. But I'm going to go back to this slide. I assume you want to start the debate with this and kind of go from there.
So unfortunately, cab drivers have very short memories and forget that we gave them the largest fare increase in the history of the city of New York, where most of the money went to them. And then it took 2 years to implement the program because in government we have these procurement rules and processes and contracts, which I think were this thick, and negotiations hard and multiple parties, subcontracts, implementation. At the end of the day, I was at the Atlanta conference and had to leave because there was an attempt to have a taxi strike. The mayor couldn't really understand when I came back to meet with him why they were striking over something that happened 2 years ago when they're making money, and credit card usage had gone up significantly to close to, I think before I left, I don't know, you guys could tell me what the latest is. I think it was like 40, 45%. Now it's up to 50%. And they got a de facto fare increase on top of that because when the recession hit, people started not using the black cars and limousines anymore, and corporate America started basically telling them to take cabs, they're cheaper, put in your slip to be reimbursed, and hence they made a heck of a lot of money with tips in excess of 20%, is that about right? So that was our solution to the problem. The Great Recession, managing the drivers and some of the things that they say. But it is an issue, and it is a problem in certain jurisdictions. So I think the goal of the session is for all of you to understand what the issue is and see if there are solutions to it and to put those out there. So why don't we start, Amos, then Jesse, and then Sarti, and maybe you can just add a little bit to what Paul discussed, clarify anything, and maybe add some information so everybody understands where we're at.
Thanks,
Amos?
Matt. Yeah, sure, thank you. So I would like to start with saying that we, the vendor, are part of the solution and not the problem. Okay? I think I pretty much agree with most of the analysis of the interchange, but you know that statistical number can be slice and dice. Anyway, it's more convenience for the party that representing it or presenting it. Based on our study, about over than 70% of the cards used in cabs are reward cards or business-related cards, which sum up to be over 2% on the interchange and about 10 cents. Just to give you an idea, and that's the interchange, that before you have processing fee or the vendor fees, etc. To give you an idea, in a market whereby we're averaging about $10 a ticket, the 10 cents alone is about 1%. Add to that the 2% that's already 3%. So I think the analysis of an average of about 1.5, I believe 5.6 and 10 cents, it's a little bit misleading, and I wanted to correct that. Today I would take the New York City market, our average ticket is about $14 with a volume of about, I assume, 55% of the total trips in a cabs paid on a credit card. The average cost for us to process a transaction, not adding any markup, not taking into consideration any of the hardware or anything, is about 3.4%. Okay? In other markets, it's varied, and the other thing that we also have to be careful as we talk through the analysis of the rates is volume has a lot to do with how much we, the vendor, can afford as far as margin. But also the dangerous thing is as the volume grows up or there's more usage of credit card inside a cab, the average ticket gets smaller and smaller. So theoretically, and actually in some cases in reality, for fares under $10, we start losing money also when we only allowed to collect up to 5%. So I think it's very tricky. I think that the norms of yesterday, it's not the norms of today. If I take some other markets, take Boston 2 years ago, if you paid by a credit card, the driver had to pay 15% to process the card. Now they're paying anywhere between, I would say, average of 5.5 to 4.5. But I think that as you introduce the new norm, no matter how much you're going to charge, it's become too expensive. The other point that I would like to highlight, and taking some of the international markets, here in the US, for whatever reason, we assume that the merchant must observe the discount rates. If you look into some of the international market, and take, for example, the UK up to about, I believe, 12 months ago, allowed the cabbies to charge 15%. To surcharge for payments with credit cards. And recently, they reduced it to 12.5. Their concept is a bit different, whereby it costs money to accept credit cards. The merchant assumes the cost, and we don't believe that the merchant should assume it and the passenger should assume it. I think this issue is very complex. Again, I've been involved in the U.S. Within over 15 different markets, including Las Vegas, New York, Boston, Chicago, Miami, and name it, some others. And I believe that almost in each city, the solution is a bit different. The only thing that it's common to all the markets is, regardless of how much we charge, it takes about 6 months before the new norms kicks in, and we become too expensive. What also it's important to remember is that we are the vendor investing. We are not selling the equipment. I think in most cases we are investing into the cab market. We don't charge upfront for the equipment, and therefore we assume the risk that if the business model is not successful, we are about to lose tremendous amount of money. With the equipment, we provide services, we provide maintenance. In many cases, we provide actual labor and work. We provide merchant services. It is nice to compare a retail store or a restaurant to a taxi, but in reality, the gap is way different. If a restaurant did not accept credit card, it's probably set in course to lose a lot of business, because people will choose another restaurant over that specific restaurant because they don't take the card. For cabbie, the norm is cash. It's not credit card. So for cabbie not to accept the card, that's fine. Today is not about to lose business, because the competition might not be accepting the card. Tomorrow, the norm will be different, and yeah, it's possible that if you don't take the card, you may lose business, and therefore the businessman or the merchant or the cabbies may assume or willing to take more risk and pay some of the fees, or assume the card cost as part of doing business. I think that's basically what I had to say for now.
That also doesn't include the TLC services that you provide, both of you, the free data that the taxi commission gets from you, the GPS data that goes along with the transactions that comes from you. Which has been very helpful for policymaking.
And this is an additional cost to the vendor.
Right, but not to the
cost to the vendor.
Right, but not to the government.
Yeah.
But we love it, and it works well. Jesse?
Now, for those who have actually come and seen a lot of these panels together, you might want to take notes, because Amos and I are going to agree 100% on everything he said. I'd just like to elaborate a little. When you talk about cost, first of all, there's a few things that you mentioned, that a merchant is the person who's receiving the money. Unfortunately, in the industry out here, very few of the drivers qualify to be merchants. Owners of businesses can be a merchant. The average lease driver is not qualified to be a merchant, so somebody has to get that person his money. So when you look out and you regulate and who's going to apply what costs, you have to make a clear distinction in your mind. Are you talking about the driver, or are you talking about the owner-operator, the person who can be a merchant? Because in all of our models, there is a different cost to what we can provide a merchant, somebody who's going to assume all the roles and responsibilities of being in the credit card business, versus the person who has to reach into his pocket every day and pay that driver at the end of his shift, knowing that he might not get the money for a few days and he has to float it. And he has to do all the administration and all the chargeback and all the inquiry reversals and manage that pot of money. So there is a difference. So it would be nice to have a solution that you can offer to the drivers across the board, but you all have to be conscious that there is an owner merchant, an owner driver, and just a lease driver. And they both have to be watched out for from a regulator's perspective. But the fact of the matter is you're asking somebody to reach into their pocket at a cost and an expense and give a benefit to somebody else. And whether it's a vendor who provides the service, whether it's the fleet who runs the car, or the owner who owns the car, someone's going to have to incur that. The other part of cost, and when Amos said comparing it to a regular retail industry, if you have a pizza shop, a restaurant, a furniture store, you get to factor in the cost of being a credit card merchant into your price. When you're in the taxi industry, you don't. It's regulated by price. And everybody who's gone out now and had to pay a ticket online or had to pay, now all the government sites, all the bills and collections, if you use by credit card, fees are being charged. Why? The credit card companies have finally recognized that in government-regulated industries, there is a cost to doing credit card processing. They want the card accepted. Why? They get interchange, they get money. Who pays? The person accepting the card. Well, they realized that was unfair in those regulated industries, so they allowed the concept of a convenience fee. Convenience fee is simply deferring the cost out to the cardholder. Something that the industry never wants to talk about. The card affiliations will downplay as much as possible, but it's a reality because why? At the end of the day, the associations want you to use the card and they're going to take their piece. They don't care who pays the bill on that. So on cost, it's not really a simple picture. And the other part, which Matt mentioned, which I think is the most important part of the cost, is if all you were looking to do is have credit card acceptance in your cabs, and that's it. There's 1,000 solutions. It is probably cheaper solutions, but you'll have no idea of what's going on in the cars. There'll be no accountability and auditability. When a person gets in a car in a city, they know they got into a yellow cab. If they had a problem or a bad experience, they're going to call up yellow cab because that's what they remember. They don't know who the driver was of that car. It's extremely unlikely. And that yellow cab, that affiliation, that association is going to have to field the call. They have a brand, they have an image they want to control and protect. They want to make sure that passengers have a quality experience in that car that they could service. From a regulator's perspective, they need the same ability. Somebody had a bad experience, they need to be able to find out what happened and become accountable. And if you just open it up and say credit card acceptance without everything else that we, the vendors, do, you give up that ability all. I mean, Conan mentioned it yesterday when he was talking about TPEP. The real value when you talk about credit card, at least when you're talking to, I would say, this panel, it's credit card in conjunction with everything else the program brings you, because it's the only way you can have a program and hope to regulate it. Otherwise, you're just going to, throw it up to the wind and see what the industry bears.
Thank you, Jesse. Sanders, you got a different bit of a different product.
Yeah,
using iPhones and.
I'm Sanders Partee from Taxi Magic. We're the only guys on the panel who don't have a New York solution right now. We bring a little bit, I think a lot of these panels spend most of the time talking about New York, and we have a solution for credit card acceptance at close to 80 taxi companies around the country, starting off with the iPhone, where you would book your ride electronically with an iPhone and then register your credit card in that application and then pay very much like paying on a house account. So we innovated that a little over about 4 years ago and have recently, in the last year and a half, gotten into the business of providing the backseat terminals. So a couple of observations outside of New York. We're in 15 cities now with our payment device, with the backseat device. And the interesting thing when we talk about costs and issues with drivers and who should bear the costs, as vendors, our costs vary tremendously city by city, fleet by fleet. The things that we're asked to do in a traditional suburban fleet are different than what the TPEP vendors are asked to do in Manhattan. The equipment that we sometimes provide is different. The volume is different. The average ticket rate is different. And clearly over the entire country we have averages and things that we can base them on. But every fleet's not different, every city's not different, and I think it's important to, it's not a one-size-fits-all. One of my frustrations coming into this part of the business is fleets will ask me, well, what is your rate? And